Reed, why don't you count us down? Wait,
All
you
right.
had an honorable mention first. Let's do the
Okay.
honorable
You want to
mention
do
one
the?
first.
All right. My honorable mention, which I almost put on my list, was Tennessee fans traveling to Columbus. I
I think
went to
that's a
that
great one.
game. I went to that game. I was not planning to go to that game because I thought tickets would be $1 billion, like they would have been if Tennessee had hosted that game. So I ended up, that game was on a Saturday. I got a ticket on a Thursday for $90
Man,
and it covered on an aisle in the corner of the end zone in the near the Tennessee section. So ended up going, and I grew up from the time I could walk essentially until my sophomore year of college. And then again, for the decade or so I covered the team, I went to every single football game, home and away. I have never in my life seen a fan base do what Tennessee did at Ohio State. Never. I've never seen an opposing fan base go to a stadium in a town and invade it
that's
like
saying
that.
something right there.
It was incredible. I thought Tennessee fans would show up, but they exceeded my expectations. It was wild. Once we got to town and then at the game itself. So yeah, my honorable mention is hat tip to Vol fans for traveling to Columbus to see a frigid playoff game, but that was never seen anything like it. So hat tip. Number 5 for me, if we're talking about on the field play, would be Jermod McCoy, who's going to appear again in this list. Jermod McCoy's interception in the end zone against Alabama. That was in the end zone where I sit, south end zone there. Section P represent. And they're coming toward us, and they're just kind of moving the ball right down the field. I'm not feeling great about the game at this point. He goes up, makes, if we're talking top plays from an impressive athleticism standpoint, that would be number one, because it was ridiculous. One of the most impressive interceptions I've seen in that stadium since like Deion Grant in 1998. So uh, incredible play by McCoy to pick that ball off one-handed, going up against one of the better receivers in the country, and then take it back almost to the house. Change the game there. Brought the crowd back into it. Crowd was kind of deflated at that point. That was 5 for me. Number 4, also a rivalry game. So the theme here was the James Pierce strip sack on the goal line versus Florida right before the end of the first half. Looked like the Vols were going to be headed to the locker room down 10-0. And now they ended up trailing 10-0 in that game in the second half. But I think that game changes drastically if that doesn't happen on the goal line. So Florida has the ball on the 1, you get the ball. That's a huge play, huge turn of events in a rivalry game as well. Then 3 for me, our man again, Jermod McCoy, back on the list. That interception versus Vanderbilt, which I think I came on the show that weekend and we talked about it then. But that was one of the more impressive picks I've ever seen. His
Yes.
awareness to tip the ball, know kind of where it's going to be as he's face down, roll over and catch it was unreal. And that was huge at that spot in that game because the Vols, if you remember the context, the Vols have to beat Vandy. They're going to clinch a playoff spot if they do. They're going to be down 24-7 if he doesn't make that play right there. And you're starting to get real nervous because I was already pretty nervous before that pick. So thought that was just a massive play. So, we've got a pick in the end zone, a strip sack going into the end zone, a pick in the end zone so far. So value plays, right, for Tennessee that help them win games. Number 2 for me, same game. Nico Iamaleava to Thornton, 86-yard touchdown pass versus Vandy that tied it up. And at that point, I knew Tennessee was going to win the game. They're back. Confidence was back. Swagger was back. Momentum was back. And, Vanderbilt really never threatened again. It was also, I think, the longest pass play since like 2003 or something for Tennessee. So it was one of those longest pass plays in 20 years and a huge spot for the Vols and an offense that desperately needed some long pass plays as well. So that was huge for me, game-changing play. And then number 1, Nico to Brazel, go-ahead touchdown versus Bama, proved to be the game winner. I was going to put some Will Brooks interceptions on this list because he had a couple of big ones this year, including going back to the NC State game. There were, and the pick in this game to seal it was massive, but Tennessee's not in position to pick Milroe off if that throw and catch doesn't happen. Great throw, great diving catch. One of those plays that we saw a lot of, 2 years ago when the Vol offense was clicking. Need more of that, but that was a huge kind of rivalry defining play for me against Tennessee's biggest rival. So that's my 5. A lot of defensive play. I had 3 defensive plays on the list, and I had some others in the running. So kind of the identity of this team this year.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. Well, Rustin, you're up now. Let's see. Your top 5 plays. I want you to count them down backwards, 5 to 1.
Well, since Reed hates Will Brooks, I'll go ahead and put him at number 5.
Not to put words in Reed's mouth.
I didn't say it. He did.
Don't make a shirt. Do not make
it. 14-10. Will Brooks picks it off, runs it back 63 yards, and the rest is history. And Tennessee beats Kentucky for the umpteen bajillionth time in a row. Number 4 was Nico to Chris Brazzell versus Alabama, as Reed already mentioned. Number 3 was Jermod McCoy's interception against Bama, only because, just as Reed said, just the sheer athleticism of it was just insane. That one-handed interception was just unbelievable. Number 2 was the James Pierce Jr. strip sack against Florida. And then number 1 probably surprised people. I thought that win over Oklahoma might have been the most important win of the season. And so, if they lose that game, what happens the rest of this season? So that Dante Thornton 66-yard touchdown against Oklahoma, I think might have been the most important play of the season because it set the tone for the rest of the season. If they don't win that game at Oklahoma, what are we talking about right now? I mean, they might have gone 7-5. They might have gone 8-4. I think it's a very different year if they don't win that game.
That's a good one. That was on my radar too there, Rustin, because I do think, we have kind of recency bias, all of us, as humans. And I went back and kind of looked at some highlights from the year when you sent me that text, Evan, and that one I'd forgotten about that play, and I'd forgotten about the big Will Brooks pick against NC State even. And there were several plays earlier in that year where you could kind of see Tennessee's identity starting to emerge, and that big play threat, and that was a huge game-turning, season-turning play. I'm with you. Big one.
So my top 5 plays.
You're not going to show all the comments about people saying Reed hates Will Brooks.
Oh, I hadn't looked at those yet. Kevin said, "Reed, who do you? Why do you hate Will?" Sad. That's pretty good. That's a good. Just sad. Dustin RC no love with WB. So my top 5 plays, and like Reed alluded to, there's a lot of different ways you can go with this. You could do, most physically impressive plays. You could do most important plays in a game, to change momentum. You could do most important plays just historically for the program. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you could look at this. And so I tried to combine them all into a conglomerate. But I would be honest with you, when I saw Jermod McCoy's interception in the end zone against Vanderbilt on Reed's list, I was like, oh, dang, I should have used that one too. Because that play was crazy good. I mean, he was on his stomach and he flipped over and caught the ball before it hit the ground. I mean, come on, man, that's a good play. So on the outset, I acknowledge that my list is flawed and I should have had that on here. Rustin's play that he mentioned with Dante Thornton at Oklahoma. I'll get to that one in a minute too, because I was debating on some stuff with that one. So, but I also had two honorable mentions. Honorable mention number one, I'm going to go all the way back to week 1 when Nico had every sports analyst and commentator salivating over him for one pass that he made against a zone, and he dropped it in about 25 yards downfield in between 3 defenders right over the top of a linebacker's reach. And Aaron Murray was gushing on the YouTubes and the interwebs about Nico Iamaleava. And all of a sudden, all Tennessee fans are like all hyping it up. I mean, they're loving it. We're thinking Nico's going to win the Heisman like week 2. I mean, just forget the rest of the season. Just give it to him already, the way everybody was talking about him. But all the way back, this is a beautiful pass. Unfortunately, we did not end up seeing more of that later in the season. I wish we had. My second one, this was just for fun, because this one is just what the game. It's a game, At the end of the day, it's a game, and this encapsulated the game. Do y'all remember when Joshua Josephs and Bryson Eason were jumping up and down like little toddlers on a preschool playground? They were so excited after a false start on the 1.5 yard line. I can't remember who we were playing, I think, but it was on their own 1.5 yard line. The very next play ended up being a safety. Jason Jenkins forced a fumble and recovered it for a safety. But after that play, there's just a false start, and Josephs and Eason are jumping up and down, like hugging each other. They're so excited, just like giddy over that. And I was like, you know what, man, that's what the game. It's a game, like that's what it's about right there. Just have some fun, man. And so I loved that. That was just an honorable mention, just because it was a reminder of what we're talking about. It's not, the end all of everything. It is at the end of the day just a game. And so I loved that. But my top 5 plays, number 5 is going to look familiar. Reed had it as well. Dante Thornton Jr. touchdown catch against Vanderbilt. And, like Rustin said, honestly, when I was thinking back across the whole season, and really this play is just a placeholder representing all of the deep crossing routes that Dante Thornton Jr. caught that went for touchdowns. I mean, like, I think he had 2 against Vanderbilt, 1 against Oklahoma. That one was just huge in the moment. Like Reed said, it was huge. And kudos to Nico. This was shades of what we saw week 1. He actually, he had already twice that game made the safety bite so bad on a play action and then dropped it right over the top of the safety. This time the safety bought a little bit, but he did recover, and Nico waited till Dante cleared that window of the safety and hit him on the other side of the safety. The safety could have baited Nico into throwing an interception, and Nico saw him, waited for Dante to clear, and then the rest is history. So that's my number 5. Number 4, the touchdown to Chris Brazzell to essentially win the game against Bama. Obviously, the situation of playing Bama, it makes this play even more important, but kudos to Brazzell. It was a tremendous catch. Drug his feet to make the catch, and quite honestly, it was really the last significant catch Brazzell had in the season, which is sad. That's not good. It seemed like from this point forward, his season kind of went downhill. Started leaving his feet pretty much every time he tried to make a catch and stuff like that. So this was Brazzell's really last significant catch of the year, and it was obviously a huge one. And so beautiful ball by Nico, even better catch by Chris Brazzell. Number 3, Jermon McCoy's interception versus Bama. Holy cow. Holy cow. You're facing a receiver who was only 17 years old at the time. I don't know if anybody knew that. But he was arguably, even only as a 17-year-old, him and Jeremiah Smith were probably the two best receivers in the country. And, here he is going up against Ryan Williams. And, dude, this may have been the single greatest rep of Jermon McCoy's entire season. And that's saying a lot because McCoy had a phenomenal season. But that particular play, he dominated Ryan Williams on that play. He jammed him at the line of scrimmage, couldn't let him get off the line of scrimmage, and then forced him away from the ball, made a tremendous one-handed catch, and then ran it back almost for 6. I mean, that was a huge play in that game and just a physically, freakishly impressive play. Just absolutely incredible. Number 2 on my list, the Will Brooks pick 6 against NC State. I have this at number 2 because I invite everybody.
Everybody likes Will except Reed.
I mentioned it. I at least mentioned it earlier.
He sure
did. And I didn't know Evan's list.
So I invite everybody who's watching. We got 749 people across all 3 platforms watching right now. I invite all of you to think back to that first and second quarter of the NC State game before it got out of hand. We were struggling offensively. That was a very close game. When that interception happened, it was a 1-score game. And all of a sudden, here comes Will Brooks, and kudos to Joshua Josephs for forcing the high pass. Will Brooks intercepts it, takes it back for 6, and the rest is history in that game. And that propelled us forward for the next several weeks. If he hadn't made that interception, and NC State was in scoring position when he made the interception, if he hadn't made that interception, all of a sudden that could be a very different game. And huge momentum swing in that game and ultimately their season. And then my number 1, and I'm shocked that, well, no, I'm not shocked. I was going to say I'm shocked that nobody else mentioned this, but it was not a physically incredibly impressive play. But my number 1 was Dylan Sampson's record-breaking touchdown. Anytime you break a 95-year-old record for a program that's in the top 10 winningest programs in college football history, and you break a record that's a 95-year-old record for that program, that's pretty dang good,
Well,
you're doing something right.
I was hoping you had that because I was going to point out that the 3 of us did not include any plays for the record-breaking running back and SEC Player of the Year in our top plays of the year. But that's kind of a testament to him being such a workhorse for Tennessee. He wasn't necessarily a human highlight reel. He just was a workhorse and the bread and butter of the offense.
Absolutely.
I took the Rick Barnes approach on that. I had the philosophy of this is what we pay you to do, so show up and do your job.
Carry the rock. Carry the rock.
Yeah.
One of the things that Tennessee fans will never forget about that play, but one of the things that made it even more special was you got a visual glimpse of just how much his teammates wanted that for him, because all 10 people, including Nico, were pushing Dylan across the goal line on that play. And that was so cool to see, man. That his teammates wanted that for him so bad. And his graciousness after it, and acknowledging all the running backs that come before him, including the record breaker, the holder of the record, but his family. But it was really just a really cool thing. And so that was my best play of the season. Obviously, it was not the most physically impressive play, but we literally got to watch history when that happened. And that's what I told my son. We're sitting in the living room, and I looked at him and I was like, buddy, we just watched history. Like, there 10 years from now, 20 years from now, you'll be watching games on ESPN or CBS, and they'll have an Aflac trivia question, and you're going to know the answer because you just watched it. Like that was a special thing.